right, let's find us a place to sit. We're going to start right now, so let's music stop, sit wherever you're at, and we're going to try to get going here. Let's open up in prayer, and then we're going to turn it over to our guest speaker for this morning, a missionary at Laos, Brother Chris Myers. So if you can grab you a seat, anybody in the hallway can get them kind of gathered in. And then we'll pray and we'll get going. Lord, we love you and thank you this morning for your mercy and your grace and your goodness. And Father, I pray you bless Brother Myers and his family as they're here. I pray that you please bless him this morning as he brings the thought for us this morning. Help us with it. Lord, we love you and we thank you for all you do for us. In Jesus' name, amen. Brother Chris, come on. We're looking forward to it this morning.
Thank you, brother.
Yes, sir.
If you will, take your Bibles and find 1 Kings. 1 Kings chapter number 8. 1 Kings chapter 8. Once again, just want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here this morning. And I want to introduce my family while you're finding 1 Kings chapter 8. Over here on the left is my wife. And go ahead and stand, sweetheart. And we are greatly encouraged. We had intervention last night at at our table, and the other couples helped kind of keep us together. So we appreciate that. It was a great time at the Valentine's Day banquet. This is my daughter Raina, and she's 13. And there's Daniel, and he's 11. And I have two older children. One daughter goes to school out in Meridian, Idaho, at Rick DeMichael's Sam Gibbs School. And she just started out there, and she's 23. And then I have a son who's 20, and he gets ready to ship out for basic training, joining the Army, and he has a Ranger contract. And so that doesn't mean he's going to be a Ranger. That means that he's 11 X-ray, and he'll get a shot at being a Ranger. My younger brother, I got a brother who's 10 years younger than me, and he was a Green Beret. And then also did work with a group called CAG that some people call Delta Force. And so a lot of, my son is getting kind of coached through the Ranger Indoctrination School and different things by my brother. So he feels like he's got a shot. We shall see, right? I want to talk to you this morning about the idea of missions, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the idea of everybody being a missionary, and I want to focus on the idea of the underground church. The underground church, and how does it work? What does the day-to-day life in the underground church look like? And when you're talking about the underground church, you're talking about basically several different groups around the world. We call, did we have our PowerPoint slide up here, guys? Basically, let's flip to that map. Now, what I'm going to try to avoid very much is to talk to you specifically about our mission. Now, it'll kind of be intertwined, and we have to a little bit just to give you some context. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the underground church. How does it work? And I want us to understand that, we got to understand that there are places in the world where it's not legal to be a Christian, okay? And when you're thinking about that, you're thinking in the Muslim world, okay? Places like Uzbekistan and Iran and Iraq and some places in Turkey. But then there are some places like Morocco where you can kind of get away with being a Christian and it's kind of live in harmony, whatever. And then there are other places in India where you are surrounded in certain pockets of areas where you have radical Hindus, okay? Now, a radical Hindu will kill you just as quick as a radical Muslim, okay? And those people have to kind of operate underground, even though they have some civil liberties. Doesn't matter if you have civil liberties. If the local government's breathing down your throat, your neck, you don't have any liberties, okay? Then there are communist countries, and we're thinking about that. We're thinking about communist China. We're talking about, when you think about that, you're thinking China sits here, and then you have Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, which we affectionately call Burma, And then up in the north, you have North Korea and some of those areas, of course, China, obviously. And so basically, when you're thinking about the underground church, there are kind of, usually in these places, there are three levels of government. There is the federal government. The federal government has said no to Christianity. No Baptist, Lutheran, Episcopalian, Pentecostal, none of that. No to Christianity. And that's the federal government. Then the state government is kind of a smaller version of the federal government, and they're also encouraging people not to be involved in that. Then you get down to the very local government. Now, the local government is run by the chief of that village, right? And so that guy, if he likes you, he can kind of thumb his nose at the state government. If he doesn't like you, he can use all the resources of the federal government to absolutely make your life miserable in the underground church. So there's kind of three different levels. Now, because of the three different levels, it really comes down to how does that local government feel about Christians. So we're going to kind of think in our mind, we're thinking about China, we're thinking about Southeast Asia right here. And one way would be the tolerance level. Now, that's where you're in the underground church, but be honest with you, that local governor, he likes you. He's kind of thinking, sees American dollar signs. He thinks help from the outside's coming in. He's kind of progressive. Maybe he's been to college. Maybe whatever reason, this guy doesn't want to persecute Christians. And so what happens is this guy is super accommodating. In fact, sometimes, let me give you an example of a missionary that gets to have that some. In southern Vietnam, there's a guy by the name of Mike Roberts. Anybody ever heard of Mike Roberts? Okay. Well, Brother Mike has this ministry where he works with the government of Vietnam, and they set up orphanages. And you talk about scratching an itch that they can't reach. Here they are taking these bona fide orphans, and they know what's happening. They know that these kids are being Christianized, and they're given the gospel, and many of them are getting saved. Now they're into second and third generation. People that were orphans are now coming back and working in the orphanage and leading more kids to Christ. They got kids that went off to college that are serving in Japan, all over the world. It's just amazing what's going on, and the government knows what they're doing, but they're so helpful. So amazingly helpful, they just sort of turn a blind eye. And in fact, in some of those churches up in the highlands of southern Vietnam, some of those churches, the cops will show up to church to make sure that nobody harasses these Christians while they worship. Right? Now that doesn't sound very threatening. That sounds like something we could do. But it took Mike Roberts years and years and years to get that done. Now, there's other places, more of kind of a second tier level. And that's where really it's kind of, they don't really want you there. A good example of this is over, now it's not a communist country, but in Thailand. In Thailand, they have some liberties, but a lot of times, Brother Knight can tell you better than me, but a lot of times the mafia doesn't want you there, So you're there leading people to Christ, and a bunch of these girls that were prostitutes are now coming out. Now there's this organization of missionaries that's keeping these guys from, you're giving these girls a home and letting them learn how to bake or learn how to sew or how to make a living without being a prostitute, and it's just wrecking their economy, right? And so they are giving you indirect persecution, but it's not as easy as over here, but it's definitely hard, but it's a different kind of persecution. But they kind of tolerate you, right? They put up with you. Now, over here in this third category is when you're in a sure enough bona fide Marxist communist country, right? And it is illegal. And that local chief he wants to stamp out any type of Christianity. And how in the world do those guys do it? How in the world do they make a difference whenever you are hunted down? So let's say that here's a village over here. You guys are all village people. Don't nobody do their Trump dance here, okay? That's not that wrong thing. And what's your name? Emily. Emily gets saved. This is her village. Nice, kind, Buddhist, animist type people. And she gets saved, but they're kind of animist. Over there, she's in the backwoods of Laos, and what's taking place there is they mix their Buddhism with their animism. Anybody know what animism is? It's the world's largest religion. It's where you worship nature, okay? The American Indians were animists. And so they would worship the eagle and hopefully have an eagle feather, you know. They would worship the river, the moon, the sun. And so what happens is some of those places, they mingle their Buddhism with their animism. And so so basically in Laos, it turns out to be what they call Taoism, which is basically it's Chinese ancestor worship, it's Buddhist ancestor worship, but with kind of black magic sprinkled in. So when she got saved, they all think she's angered the gods. The river's going to give them no fish, the clouds are going to give them no rain, and they kicked her out of her village. Now, back in the 1950s, there was a group, actually in the 1800s, there was a group called China Inland Mission by Hudson Taylor. And in the 1950s, they got run out of China. And so what they do, their ministry right now, they've changed their name, and their ministry now is they have coffee shops set up all over Laos and communist countries, coffee shops. And so what happens, Emily got run out of her village. Somebody told her there's a name of a coffee shop and those people can help you. So she comes into the village, goes to the coffee shop, and they love her. They help her. They give her a place to stay. They give her food. They give her clothing. And they start teaching her how to bake. They start teaching her how to run a coffee shop. She works in the coffee shop, but guess what her primary thing she's doing? She's getting discipled on a very basic level. She's learning about salvation by grace through faith. And these coffee shops are kind of all over the area. Now, that's a way to make sure Emily has a place to go. But there's more work that needs to be done in China and Laos and different places. And so what happens is there will be people that come to those places, and all of those places are considered creative entry countries. Creative entry countries. And what they mean by creative entry, you got to find a way to get in there. Okay, now understand something. Everybody understand what a passport is, right? That's America saying you can go abroad. All right, but how many know there's a difference between a passport and a visa? A visa is the other country saying you can come here. Now, if you wanted to go to like El Salvador runs off American currency. Central America. You show up there and you pay $30 at the gate and they just give you a visa. They're happy you're there. But did you know that not every country is excited about Americans coming, specifically those countries that have an underground church? So you call the embassy in Laos, and they will, with certain different, jump through certain hoops, and you can get a 30-day visa. That's where you can come and you can be like a backpacker, or you can do something like that. You get a 30-day visa. But if you want to stay very long, like a year or 2 years or indefinitely, now they're not going to let you do that. You've got to come up with a way to do that. Now, that's a 30-day visa in Laos. What do you think they'll do for you in China? Give you a 10-day visa. I mean, they don't want you there very long at all. So how in the world do you get this longer-term visa? Well, you've got to come up with a way. Now, one way that people do that is through a thing called ESL, English as a Second Language. And so there are universities there, and in those different places and different companies, and they'll let you come, and they will come to the University of Vincheng. I just made that, I'm not sure what they call it. And they will let you go for 4 hours a day. They love that Midwestern accent. They want to hear from a native English speaker. Now, what you've got to do is you think, oh yeah, man, they have to sit and talk to me. Well, you can be real creative about it. You can talk to them about culture. Oh, wow, I'm studying Buddhist culture. And you know what Buddhist culture is? It's about eliminating suffering. But all those people have done for the last 1,000 years have attacked each other and warred with each other and just made endless suffering. So what you would do is you'd flip it around and you would say, yeah, we don't want suffering in America either. We call that Christianity because there's a life after death. And there's a place called heaven and a place called hell. And we try to lead people to Christ so there's no eternal suffering, right? So that's kind of a cue, but you better just watch your P's and Q's, because as soon as they get, oh yeah, she is a mystery, boom, missionary, she's out of here. They don't renew your visa. They give you a one-way flight to Hong Kong or something like that. And so another way is known as they'll start, they've kind of, some of these places have changed a little bit. For example, Vietnam. In Vietnam, did you know that Ashley furniture is now made completely in Vietnam? If you go to the Ashley Home Store, just look on their case goods items. A lot of that stuff is made in Vietnam. And so China had a one-child policy for a long time, and I don't know if you know this, but don't listen to the news about China and the giant and they're going to do this, that, and the other. China's collapsing. Okay, their economy is, in 10 years, they won't be the China they are today. And they know that. That's why there's this big power surge. In America, we have our, we do a thing called urbanization in the 1950s. Remember when everybody lived on the farm? Remember that? How many kids did they have? Huh, ton of them. Why? That's free labor, right? Okay. But when all y'all moved to the cities, now all of a sudden, I don't need 7 kids to milk the cows, right? In fact, every kid I now have is what they call a liability, okay? Now, I've got to feed them, I've got to educate them, I've got to, teach them how to not yell at their mom, it just gets crazy, right? So we went from 6, 7 kids down to our 2.2 or whatever, right? And so, what's that? Try 17, okay. So some of you are for religious reasons, but the point is that we get an influx of people that are just crazy to come to America. They'll come in illegally and whatever. And what that does is that those young people in our country they're roofing your house, they're laying your carpet, they're framing, they're doing all the manual labor work, right? But did you know in China, nobody's fighting to get in there very much, okay? And so that's why it's kind of collapsing. So there are places like Vietnam and Cambodia and also Thailand that would love to pick up all the business, okay? So sometimes they'll ease up the standards. Now, I'll give you an example in Laos. Now, Laos is like living in Thailand, but going back in time 40 years, okay? And in Laos, they recently changed the rules about how to get into the country. For example, they said, okay, well, here's 3 criteria. If you meet all these criteria, you can come in. One is, it's called what they call a brokered visa. One criteria is you got to be over 50. We're looking for people that are Americans that are retiring, right? My wife and I just turned 50 this last year. And you have to have $4,000 a month income and prove that you have $4,000. And then you've got to have a reason for being here, right? You got to have a reason for being here. And my wife was born in Laos, and that's our reason. And so when you put all those together, there's very few people that can find all 3 of those criteria. And so as a result of that, my wife and I feel like we had to go. We didn't feel like we were called. We were called, but we felt like we were more like we were drafted. If we didn't go, who's going to go, right? Now, there's, with that in mind, you got to understand that China in the 1950s had what they called the Great Leap Forward. And basically, they became communists. Now, take yourself back to World War II, okay? In World War II, United States defeated what major Asian empire? It was Japan, right? Did you know all those people hate Japanese? You never met people more racist in your life than go to Asia. Man, and I know some of you probably saying, well, I don't know, I could tell the difference between Korean and China. They can. If you watch a Bruce Lee movie, okay, how many, now be honest here, I know we're all Baptists, but how many have seen a good, who loves a good Bruce Lee movie, right? Do you know who the bad guy always is? He's always Japanese, right? Because they hate Japanese. And did you know in World War II, we sometimes think about the atrocities that happened to the Jews, right? Did you know that when Japan invaded Vietnam and Korea and China, they did just as bad or worse things? Do you know those Japanese officers would take 2-year-old children and throw them up in the air, and the other officers would try to catch them with their bayonet? I don't want to ruin your day, but just Google sometime Korean comfort girls, and you'll find one of the most horrendous things. You're like, how could that even happen in the 20th century? And so what happened is when the United States decided that they were going to rebuild Japan, all of those Asian countries said, what? That's the stupidest, craziest thing we ever heard of. That's terrible. And so do you know what a lot of them did, especially China? Well, if the one superpower is going with Japan, they went to Russia. And China had a guy come to power by the name of Mao. And Mao started what they call the Great Leap Forward with industrialization. And go back to that, I'm sorry, I false sign. Mao went back to this industrialization. Now, if you didn't want to be communist in 1950s in China, basically you had two options. You hopefully run for your life and get out of there, or you are killed and starved to death. And did you know that 60 million people died in the 1950s in communist China in the Great Leap Forward? And some of them were starved to death. Do you know who disproportionately was starved? Little children, little girls, because they were not considered valuable. And so now my wife, her family, her grandparents lived in southern China. And for them, they had to run for their lives. They wanted to go to a place that they knew that war would never happen. Never again would they have to see a communist. So they moved to Vietnam, okay? Right? And then in 1950s, communism spread to Vietnam. And the French, who had just gotten pasted in World War II, ready to show how strong they were, they stood up against the communists, and the French, her family joined the French army and started in that war against the North Vietnamese. Then, whenever they lost that war, the French lost that war, then they had to run again for their lives. They went to this country of Laos. Now, I'm giving you their story, but this is a common story across the entire region. So they moved to Laos. But guess what happened in 1965? The United States got involved in the war, and all of this area, Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, were now going to be in the war. Supposedly, Laos was not a place where military operations, but did you know from the top of Laos down to the bottom was this road they called the Ho Chi Minh Trail? And Laos is the most bombed country per capita in the history of the world. They would bomb the Ho Chi Minh Trail morning, noon, and night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for some 6 or 7 years straight. And so what happened is her dad, my wife's dad, and her uncle started to work for the United States CIA in Laos, doing what they call black operations. And since then, that's a big famous term, black ops, that now is made of video games and movies and everything. But they would do these black operations. And what they would do is they would look at this village. Her dad would infiltrate back to the same village. This is before Emily was born. And went into this village, and they would basically go in. Her dad would see who the good guys and the bad guys were, then would get in the helicopter the next day, fly over it with a CIA agent, and basically tell who the good people, which areas was good, which ones were bad, tell them all the intel on the area. And in 1975, the United States lost the Vietnam War and was now pulling out of Vietnam, and they had what was known as the Fall of Saigon. Anybody ever heard of the Fall of Saigon? And you can Google that. They're flying helicopters out of Saigon to aircraft carriers. Not enough room, pushing those helicopters off into the water to make more room for more refugees. It was terrible. It was reminds you a whole lot of what just happened in Afghanistan. And so what happened was that whole area now was going to be communist. Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, all that was going to be communist. And there come a guy to power in Cambodia by the name of Pol Pot. And Pol Pot, they started rounding up all the people that had helped the Americans in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam and shipping them to Cambodia, and Pol Pot was killing them by the millions. 2.7 million people shot, killed, tortured, thrown into mass graves. And it was called, if you want to Google it, it's called the Killing Fields of Cambodia. Very terrible, terrible, one of the worst genocides. And so her dad, who had worked for the CIA, got their family across the Mekong River into a town in Thailand called Nam Khai. Nam Khai was a famous place for refugees, and they got put in a refugee camp, and eventually the Methodist Church in Centerville, Iowa, sponsored them. And so my wife grew up in Iowa. She was born in 1974. She got there by the time she was 1976, time she was about 18 years. In fact, show the next slide there. This is the newspaper. That's my wife right there and her family that had fled across the river, and this was the write-up in their local town. Go back to the other slide. So basically what happens so I'm giving you that as a historical context. When you're thinking about the underground church, you got to think about what has happened there, what these people have been through, okay? You think, oh yeah, well Mui will be able to go back. But if she left, that meant that she was part of the group that left because they helped the Americans. And so for 40 years, they haven't really been excited about those people coming back, right? And so how does it work in the underground church? In the most strictest areas? Well, let me give you some examples. So what we need is a missionary, okay? What's your name again? Jeremiah is the missionary. Jeremiah, stand up and say hi to everybody. The missionary, Jeremiah. Okay. Now, Jeremiah has a guy in Laos, let's just say, and he is a bona fide Christian. He's part of the underground church. He's a pastor. What was your name again? Chris. I'm going to remember that. Chris, stand up. Now, here's the deal. What we need is for Jeremiah to be able to stay in Laos. And the way it's going to happen, Emily, who just got kicked out of her village, is going to, I heard that Jeremiah is missionary. Hey, Jeremiah, could you please teach me the Bible? You know what Jeremiah is going to say? I don't even know what you're talking about. Because the first time he teaches her something she didn't want to hear, she might be the one that turns him into the cops. So everything about their underground church is going to go right through Chris. He's the filter. He's the one that keeps that guy here. And so what happens is, you can sit down, Jeremiah, for now. Chris has he's pouring his life into, what's your name? What's your name? Jose, stand up, Jose. These guys have a small little rinky-dink underground church, his family and his family, but you're pouring your life into Jose. Okay, now here's the deal. You two already agree that when you get to 20 people, you're going to split. Okay, when you get to 20 people, you're going to split. So you're discipling everybody in your church, Chris, but that guy's getting the vast majority of your attention. Now you've got to 20 people. Now, Jose, you're going to take off and you're going to go enough away, and you're going to pick you out a new Timothy. You're going to pick you out a new Timothy, and you're going to pour what he taught you into your guy, and you're going to pick out another one and another one. So you guys sit down. What could happen is in a town of, say, 20,000 people, there's been enough church splits, right? Now, you know these guys are Baptists, right? There's been enough church splits, there might be 12 to 17 or 18 pastors. Now, just because they're a pastor doesn't mean they've had any Bible training. Doesn't mean that they really understand some of the basic. That's where Jeremiah comes in. Now, what's going to happen is Jeremiah is going to try to organize these guys. Okay, every now and then one of them gets thrown into jail, but Jeremiah, thanks to giving churches like this, and now has money, and he spends the $200, gets him out of jail, and he kind of cools off a little bit, and they kind of work around, and so, but Jeremiah needs to get all these guys some training. Now, there is a couple of ways to do that. Okay, now what's your name? What's that again? Heron. Okay. Karen or Heron? Heron. Okay. Pretty name. Everybody knows Heron's a Christian. They know she is rock solid. Okay. And so what she does, the second Tuesday of every month, she goes to the park. Come with me, Heron. She goes to the park, and she sits down at the park. I want you to sit down right here. She's at the park. No, you're going to go pray. Just have a seat. Just sit down. And she's going to read the paper. You're reading the paper. And what's going to happen is all those pastors at exactly 10 after 10 are going to be in the park area, and exactly 10 after 10, they're going to look right at her. She's just going to be reading her paper. If she drops her paper and bends down and picks it up again, that means there's going to be a meeting, right? But now where's the meeting going to be? So in about 10 more minutes, Heron is going to walk with me. She's going to take her paper. She's walking along and walking down the street. She's just messing around. And she turns and walking up the road, and she accidentally drops her paper again. And she picks it back up. She walks on. That's the house in 3 weeks where the meeting's going to be. Right? Thank you, Miss Heron. Didn't you do a good job? I appreciate you. Now, that's one way it works. Now, there's 1,000 other ways. I mean, that's the most common. I mean, it's real simple, you can kind of... And so what happens now is Jeremiah is going to show up at that house in 3 weeks, and there's going to be 16 or 17 pastors all right there in that living room. In a small little space, they're going to be shoulder to shoulder, probably just squatting, no furniture, just squatting. For 7 or 8 hours, Jeremiah's going to be teaching them the Bible. And guess what? He's going to have his projector out. He's going to have PowerPoint slides. Now, guess what? He's also, over the time, he's made sure that all of these guys have a small little laptop computer. They're a couple $100. They're not expensive to get now. And so all the material that Jeremiah gives them, he wants them to train their churches in that material. And how many has a thumb drive or a flash drive at home, right? That's way too big. You can't use that. Because if the Lao government catches you and pats you down, it's not like TSA, a little wave of the wand, oh, you're good. No, man, they're reaching up inside your mouth. It is intense, okay? And you hope they have gloves. You hope you change gloves between the last guy, right? Not always. And so what happens is that flash drive is too big. They find that flash drive. So how many knows there's a thing called an SD card, about the size of a stamp? Still too big. How many knows there's a thing called a micro SD card? You can put that in your mouth. You could swallow that if you had to, right? And so he hands out the micro SD cards. You usually have a reader right there on the little laptop, the ones they picked out. And there's this one guy in one of the countries. His name is, I won't say what his name is, but he's famous. He's an underground church pastor, been arrested hundreds of times probably. And the word on the street is this guy has pulled one of his big molar teeth because that SD card can fit right in between there. And that's what he does. Now, Jeremiah is now actively training pastors. And the Word of God is opening like a flower to them. He assesses these guys. And he says, okay, this guy is his kind of discipleship one. He couldn't find He couldn't find the book of Zechariah with a flashlight, man. We need to go back over eternal security. We need to go back over prayer. We need to go back over Bible reading. We need to help him just basics. Then discipleship 2 and discipleship 3, and then there's discipleship 4. And discipleship 4 is the pastors that really are getting it. They're hungry. They want to know, why is that there's so many different kinds of churches? They want to know, why is the tribulation 7 years long? Why do we know for sure the rapture happens before the tribulation? Who is the devil? Who is Satan? Who is Lucifer? Is he a fallen angel? Answer, no. He's a fallen cherub, which now you got to know what a cherubim is. Now you're over in Ezekiel chapter 1 and you're seeing that thing show up, and it's the best stuff they ever heard in their life, and they're growing. But we need more than that. So what Jeremiah done is, we're in Laos, what he's done is he talks to the other pastors. He said, okay, we're going to get a hold of Brother Eric, and Brother Eric knows a guy in Thailand who has a great ministry, Brother Semish. He has a compound, he has a church, he has a conference area. And so all of his pastors, Jeremiah is going to organize all of his pastors to get work visas to go over for 30 days and do some little work job in Thailand. But they get over there, they're not going to do that. Now, they're all going to get a check written to them that looks like, they got money for doing the job. But when they get over there, they're going to have a good old-fashioned camp meeting. They're going to have a leadership conference. They're going to get to worship freely. There's going to be so much material. There might be other speakers that come in to train them in different aspects of ministry and working with the underground church. They might get to meet each other, make plans. Okay, so you're in Pak Se, well, I'm in Vinh Chung, and what's it like there? And they get to converse back and forth. It's a great time. That's how the underground church works. And then, if that wasn't even good enough, Jeremiah's got his eyes on a bigger prize. Did you know that those visas, you know how we can go to countries that are friendly to America real easy? Did you know those people in communist countries can go to other communist countries fairly easily? They can easily get the visa. So he's now talking to these guys, saying, now guys, I know you all are pastors, but how many of you ever had a desire to be a missionary to another country? A couple, 3 of them raised their hand, but yeah, how would I ever do that? Well, we're recruiting people that would want to be missionaries to North Korea, because you can get in there with your passport from your communist country. And let me tell you what, there are some crazy things happening around the world just like that. Let me give you an example. I won't name names of different, but you know how we have problems, thank you, Jeremiah, by the way. You know how we have problems with Hispanics coming into the United States illegally. Now, let me just tell you, if you lived in El Salvador, if you lived in Guatemala, if you lived in Honduras, you would probably be sending your kids, you'd be doing anything you could to get out of there too, right? So we don't fault them for that. But they're coming in illegally, and there's all this political and drama and all this different stuff. Do you know China has the same problem with North Koreans? North Koreans are starving. And they're just trying to get out anywhere. So they go across the border illegally into China sometimes. But the Chinese don't let them just walk around the country. Chinese round them up. They make them stay there in refugee camps on the slums on the border and wait for them to starve or wait for them to fend for themselves and just go back, right? But did you know there's an alliance of North American missionaries, Baptist missionaries, that get into China and they go to those slums and they feed them, they clothe them, they lead them to Christ, and they have a 3-year Bible Institute that's set up there. And do you know what happens on top of that? Then there is an alliance of North American churches from all different denominations. They don't really even know what all the money goes to, but they know it goes to the underground church. And those people give thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and that money goes through a money laundering system that gets back to a South Korean company who then hires those guys to come back to North Korea with jobs. Now, they don't have jobs, but they're fully funded missionaries in North Korea. How many are there? There's over 300. There's over 300. And there are other places, other clandestine organizations. There's one that I'm thinking of that if I said their name, I guarantee not one person in here has ever heard their name. And then if you just Googled their name, you'd be like, what does a well-digging company in Africa have to do with global missions? But you know what they do? They train Latinos. So if you're Guatemalan, if you're from El Salvador, you're from Mexico, you're Honduras, you're Nicaragua, you're Costa Rica, Argentina, maybe Colombia, maybe Venezuela, whatever, you're a Latino, right? Brown skin. Now you got some things that a white person can't do. Probably count to 5. Okay, that's one of them. But on top of that, they train in San Salvador. They train Latinos, brown-skinned Latinos, to be missionaries in Muslim countries. And do you know? I mean, places like Uzbekistan, places like Iraq, and I asked one of the guy on the board of directors, how many have you trained and sent out and are currently operating on the field? And he said it's around 12,000. In crazy hard to get to places. And these guys, they're never going to make Christianity Today. You're never going to hear about. These guys are not going to make headlines on Fox News. They're making headlines in heaven. They haven't got America and Donald Trump standing behind them. They have the Lord Jesus Christ. And some of those guys are paying for it with their own blood. It's not like, oh, hey, give us our hostages back. These people are, they're just forgotten, shot, killed, tortured, thrown in jail, still in jail right now, but some of them are leading people to Christ by the thousands. In places like Iran, I led a Muslim couple to Christ a few months ago in Iran. Basically, there's a revival, but it's all amongst these women. These women are getting saved left and right, and they're trying their best. And it's these missionaries that are coming in to kind of help them organize their underground. How do they have an underground? How do they organize what Jeremiah has put together in his churches? And the answer is they use these missionaries that come around. There are also people that say they locate outside. They go to a friendly country like the Philippines or like Thailand or someplace, and they make short-term trips in and help. If they, there's all kinds of ways to skin that cat. But let me tell you what, you can rest assured that God is doing great things on planet Earth. Now, the challenge is for you to stay mission-minded, that's for sure. I pastored for 25 years, and I've built 2 gymnasiums at my church. I mean, we just, cafe gymatoriums. I mean, I know what it's like to pastor here in the States. We've got to stay focused on missions, but then you got to understand that you also are a missionary. If some brown-skinned guy from Nicaragua is leading people to Christ in Uzbekistan, what are you able to do in Copper's Cove? At your job site, at your amongst your friends in your school. We're all on mission. We are all dialed in on the Great Commission, and we are in it to win it. We're taking people from zeros to heroes, and there's people all over the world. You think, well, the church is so we're just not the church we used to be. Right here, we're not. That's for sure. You guys are fighting that battle, okay? But around the world, there's first-generation Christians getting saved every single day. We're going to close here at 10:30, and it's 10:29. Does anybody, and I was looking for Pastor here, but does anybody have a quick question or anything? All right. Brother Chris, the Underground Church pastor, would you stand up and close us with prayer, brother?